On the left, yeah, Black-White Aristocrats. That was, like I said, recently popping up online, seeing if we can get another good finish here. Tom Ross playing Bant Megamorph. He's on the right as we start things out. Now, normally, how do you feel about the rally decks in the format? We see them crop up from time to time, especially against this kind of fair Bant-style strategy.
Well, I think there's the major thing for me is how well does the deck look at cards? Because most of the time, your just curve of creatures, it's not going to be good enough to win the game. So how reliably can you search for the other pieces? And that's where you see things like Satyr Wayfinder be a pretty big cost for this deck to lose. That said, I think this deck is a little bit better equipped than some of the previous versions to win kind of naturally. You have 4 copies of Hangerback Walker, and you can do some very synergistic things with that and Nantuko Husk. You have Smothering Abomination. That card left unchecked is also capable of winning a game.
Yeah, also interested, a Karsi High Priest in a lot of ways can actually fuel bigger Rally of the Ancestors as well as finding your way towards some of these other cards.
Yeah.
So it's going to be Carrier Thrall on turn 2 for Alan Jackson. That's the 2/1 that when it dies, you get an Eldrazi Scion. Tom Ross has a Warden of the First Tree as we go back to Jackson on turn 3.
So with the way the mana bases look now, the type of deck that struggles the most to get enough mana fixing are 2-colored non-allied decks. And to that end, Alan Jackson playing 4 copies of Scoured Barrens, a cycle of lands that's basically fallen off the radar, but it's necessary for him to get enough mana fixing into the list.
Yeah, not actually running Shambling Vent, which I was a little surprised to see. But if you have no interest in activating a creature, perhaps the life gain is just better.
Yep. I mean, it's probably better against a deck like I would say a Tarka Red. I'd rather have 1 life than a Shambling Vent that requires a lot of mana to activate.
Yeah, Alan's turn 3 was a Sultai Emissary. No third land. It's just kind of, you look at his deck. Okay, he's 4-0, but at some point it looks like there's just a crew of draft commons.
Though I'm sure Ross is aware roughly of what's going on here. I mean, these cards don't show up for no reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of death triggers going on for sure. Tom opts not to attack with this Warden. He didn't actually want to pump it, and Alan perhaps would have just blocked with Sultai Emissary. Instead, he makes a Morph and passes back. Normally that's a free roll to attack with Warden, but again, when Sultai Emissary is on the other side of the board, it's not really free anymore.
Nope.
There is a copy of Rally of the Ancestors in Alan's hand. Looks like he's still missing that land drop, so he's going to go swing Carrier Thrall. And this is definitely a check on Tom. If Tom blocks, Alan will get a Scion, and he'll get a 3rd mana.
I believe Jackson's draw for the turn was also Caves of Koilos. So he has land number 3 no matter what.
Interesting. I mean, in Tom's spot, this looks like it's a mana-screwed opponent trying to get a mana. But as you said, the draw is Caves of Koilos, so not so. Either way, Tom blocks. Death Mist Raptor in the yard. Jackson will get a Scion. And as you mentioned, we do see the land here. And it's going to be Merciless Executioner for Alan Jackson.
Nice looking turn.
Yeah, takes care of his own Sultai Emissary and the Warden of the First Tree. So he gets a Manifest after the 1/1 dies. And yeah, he's doing a pretty good job of just playing fair magic at the moment. Now, when Tom starts going for cards like Siege Rhinos, then fair magic, Siege Rhino is the king of fair magic.
Yeah, at that point you had to pivot and try to become a Rally of the Ancestors deck. But Jackson so far doing a very good job just handling random creatures out of Ross's deck, which is impressive.
Here's Knight of the White Orchid from Tom. 2/2 for strike. Remember, actually, yeah, with the Bant Megamorph decks, apologies, there's nothing like a Siege Rhino here. I suppose his most Siege Rhino style card is something like Gideon. If he wants to just play fair magic, that'll put pressure on Alan to suddenly turn into, I guess, a Rally of the Ancestors deck. Yeah. Knight is the play. Now, Alan continues to go wide with the board. This is Zulaport Cutthroat. Plays that. And has another Sultai Emissary in hand, so he's going to go ahead and crack a fetch land to try to make that creature. And this is where he starts, seems to look like the synergy part of his deck now.
Yep. Cutthroat's a big part of this. I imagine this is the most reliable way to kill via Rally. You just have this and Nantuko Husk and a bunch of other creatures in play. You can kill from there. Also, when the game looks like this, where maybe you're trying to set up a longer game or maybe you're just trying to play fair magic, you just get these little chip shots in with the Cutthroat.
Yeah, Hangerback Walker on 1 is the other play, and he passes the turn. So 5 creatures on Alan's side. Does have 2 more in the graveyard, and I believe a Rally in hand. So, yeah, you have to start counting here, especially because of that Cutthroat. You see Tom, yeah, he's going to go ahead and use this opportunity to Dromoka's command and fight down the Zulaport Cutthroat.
Yeah, it has to start there.
will drain Tom down to 17, but now with a 3-3 first strike in play. So Tom's not taking damage, at least until Alan gets a cutthroat back, but then it doesn't look like right now that he can afford to attack. So what's his line? You know, he needs to start getting in for damage here, right?
He needs some flyers. That's what it comes down to. And even if he finds a flying creature, if Jackson finds a sack outlet for the hangerback walker, that doesn't work anymore as well. It feels like Ross is getting into a pretty tough spot here with Alan just kind of like gumming up the works here, slowing the game down, getting in points of damage, and still playing towards Rally Ancestors.
On his turn, though, Tom's going to swing. Does that mean we have some birds showing up? Or some? Yeah, he'll go with a morph, actually. And 2 mana up. That feels like a Den Protector.
And Deathmist Raptor in the graveyard.
Right, so it'll be and get back something like Dromoka's Command. Maybe protect himself, insulate himself from a rally kill. But Jackson down to 16. Remember, he did get that manifest earlier, so depending what he manifested into, could have a flip-up ability. And it's going to be a face-up Grim Haruspex from Jackson. Sultai Emissary, the last card in his hand. Now, Haruspex, so important to remember, whenever another non-token creature dies, he gets to draw cards that won't trigger off the Eldrazi Scion, but can give him range to just attack with everything else if he wants to. And if you assume that's a Den Protector as the morph, Tom probably needs to fight down this Grim Haruspex.
Yes. And that's why I think you're seeing Jackson kind of pass the turn here. Put the ball in Ross's court to move first, and if Jackson has something like one of his copies of Murderous Cut, he gets the full blowout. And even if he doesn't, he starts wearing down Ross's removal spells, which will eventually make the rally even more powerful.
Yeah, and there was the flip, getting back Dromoka's Command and putting Deathmist Raptor into play. So Den Protector on Tom's side. Both players at 16 life at the moment. 3 creatures in play from Tom. We know about a Dromoka's Command in his hand. 5 on the board for Alan, 1 card in his hand. But so many cogs in play, right? Grim Haruspex, Hangerback Walker.
And Ross probably needs to just make a move and kill the Grim Haruspex and see what happens. He can't even really attack with Den Protector in this spot because Jackson can block with Merciless Executioner, trade, and draw a card. Even that alone is too bad for Ross, I feel like. So he may have to kill Grim Haruspex, see what the response is from Jackson.
Right? I mean, on Tom's side, his concern is something like Murderous Cut, right? He's worried that if he goes for this fight, he'll just lose both cards. But because he's so paralyzed by the Haruspex, yeah, he's going to go for the play anyway and be shielded down to the kill spell.
Yep, it's dangerous, but I don't think Ross can really proceed on the board at all with Grim Haruspex in play, so this is the cost he's got to pay.
All right, counter on Deathmist Raptor, and Deathmist Raptor will fight Haruspex. And as we know, Jackson does not have the cut. His last card is another copy of Sultai Emissary.
Though we don't know what the manifest is.
And it's going to be a Nantuko Husk.
Ooh.
Oh, wow. So sacks Hangerback Walker to draw a card. Gets a Thopter. And I guess, so he's looking for a rally here. Seeming likely. And then he'll go ahead and sack away the Haruspex. So Nantuko Husk, a 6/6 at the moment. Only drawing 1 card. He had the option of stacking the Executioner, but he does have to be careful with how much of that he does.
Well, I think with the Executioner is doing such a good job right now of checking the Den Protector that unless he has a rally kill rolled up already, I think there's not a lot to be gained by eating for a card.
Yeah, he goes down to 12 off the hit from Deathmist Raptor. And what I do like about Jackson's deck right now is just how much he can clog up the ground. You know, he has that Sultai Emissary in hand. That plus Nantuko Husk is so many more blocks coming up.
Yeah, takes a long time to get through that.
And all the while, he's working towards something like Rally. You go back to Jackson. He's on 12. Draws a land. We know he has Sultai Emissary land. He has 1 more card. That was the card he drew off the Haruspex last turn. There's the Emissary.
And you can see what the game plan is here from Jackson's side of the table. Ross is better straight up, creatures against creatures, of playing this sort of attrition style game. But he's not so much better that he can survive Rally the Ancestors getting this all back for a second wave.
And how good is another copy of Grim Haruspex here? So now when there's the chump blocking happening, Alan will be drawing cards. And actually, Alan's going to go on the aggressive side here. He's going to swing with Nantuko Husk.
I mean, at the minimum, Jackson can do something like sacrifice a Sultai Emissary, draw a card, and still have the same number of blockers back on the way. He also is incentivized to get some damage going on Ross here because he wants to make sure that if he finds Rally, it's lethal. And all the little points of damage that he gets alongside things like Zulaport Cutthroat, if he can keep a Nantuko Husk in play, that helps a lot too. That can make sure that Rally just wins the game on the spot.
Well, yeah, he has to make sure that when he casts Rally, he has one Cutthroat, and then he counts the number of creatures he has in the graveyard, keeping in mind that things like, Sultai Emissary counts twice. But he has to think just, okay, how, I think if he gets a hit in for 4 here with an Nantuko Husk, it seems likely that the Rally would be lethal. So I like Tom's blocking you with Den Protector. That still forces the sack of Sultai Emissary. Manifests a card, and then Alan gets to draw a card off the Haruspex. So now it's a 4/4. It'll get to eat Den Protector. Yeah, Alan drawing cards here, and it's, it's not costing him much to do this. He set up a pretty decent defense.
And forget what I said about, Ross being a favorite just pound for pound creatures against creatures.
Yeah, it's barely that way, if at all.
Grim Haruspex plus Nantuko Husk makes attacking and blocking very problematic for Ross.
Well, we'll see if Nissa Vastwood Seer's flipped side can do anything about that. She'll draw a card. That's the Windswept Heath. It'll go into play.
And it's tough because if you're in Ross's position, it's only a matter of time. Jackson's deck definitely has Rally the Ancestors in it. He's looking at a lot of cards, and you can't wait forever to try to win this game. On the other hand, Jackson's kind of just winning the game on the table. Yeah, and there's not a lot of attacking that can be done.
Yeah, Jackson can just continue to swing this Nantuko Husk. And, when blocks happen, he can still block sack with creatures and draw cards.
And Jackson can even take this hit from Knight of the White Orchid. He doesn't have to move on this.
Right, Knight's going to swing in. And that's what he'll do. He'll go down to 9. At some point, if you're on Tom's side, do you just have to trade this Death Mist Raptor with Nantuko Husk? Husk is so good right now.
Yes. I don't see any other way for him to block this card effectively.
Merciless Executioner was the draw for Jackson. This mono black version, remember, plays multiple copies of this card.
And really the only way for Ross to be able to beat this level of attrition is by getting good trades with Death Mist Raptor, drawing Den Protector, and getting everything back. So Ross is already incentivized to find blocks with Death Mist Raptor when they're available. And this Nantuko Husk is approaching lethal. And it also just represents so much flexibility with Jackson's ability to draw cards, to manage combat, that I assume Ross is just going to go for a block here.
All right, well, here's Nantuko Husk. Tom is at 16, so not just dead if he doesn't block, but yeah. Here's the Death Mist Raptor. Okay, the trade will happen. Now Alan has to decide if he wants to sack anything in response. He's going to flip up Zulaport Cutthroat. That was the manifest. That is bad news if you're a Tom Ross fan. So first he'll start out by sacking the token to Nantuko Husk. It becomes a 4/4 and drains Tom for 1.
Now remember, he doesn't draw off of that. It's non-token.
Exactly. Now they trade. Triggers off both. So Tom down to 14, Alan to 11, and now Alan draws a card. That's really scary. We've been talking about how he's been searching for Rally, but he may not even need it.
He may not need it, but we're now approaching the level where if Jackson finds it, it's definitely lethal. We've now found a second copy of Zulaport Cutthroat, and Ross will not be able to survive Rally if it shows up.
Here's the replacement Nantuko Husk from Alan Jackson. 1 card remaining in his hand. Nissa going to draw a Silk Wrap. That's a great draw here. He'll cast it.
Yeah, I imagine Ross needs to answer Grim Haruspex. Force Jackson to make some sort of commitment here.
Yeah, he's going to target Nantuko Husk. And Husk will sack itself, drain Ross down to 13, draw himself a card. It's so hard. There's so many cogs you feel like he'd have to answer. I could see him taking any creature but Merciless Executioner there.
Right. That's the only one that does nothing.
Ross plays a land, but still can't attack. And now we see end step Murderous Cut is the play by Alan. Can take care of one of Tom's blockers. He's going to exile. Well, looks like he had to get rid of a Haruspex in 2 lands. I'll take care of 1 Knight of the White Orchid. Now we're back to Alan's side. The fact that Tom can't attack on any of these turns just makes it feel so inevitable for Alan. But what kind of card would it take? I mean, you talked earlier about flyers, and I guess that's just really that's just it. You know, a Wingmate Rock would give Tom some play.
Although not anymore, as Jackson ripped Merciless Executioner now. Nissa's dying, and Ross is playing off the top of the deck.
Yeah, Executioner played. That was a sacrifice, a draw, a life gain for Alan. Here's the swing for 7. 6 at Nissa, 1 at Tom. Tom down to 11. Nissa hits the bin. Yeah, we're just playing a fair game of Magic, and Alan's winning it.
And I think the last card in Alan's hand is Rally, and he may not even need it.
Sultai Emissary is the play for Alan. And normally when you see commons and uncommon creatures face off against a stack of rares, you think the rares usually come out on top, but not so here. Tom drawing Wingmate Rock finally, but it's too late at this point. Tom has lost all his creatures, so it's only 1 Lonely Bird as opposed to the pair of them. And Alan continues to swing in. Executioner jumps in front of Wingmate Rock rather jumps in front of Executioner. Alan not really caring though. Tom taking 1 off the Sultai Emissary, 1 off the Executioner, Death Trigger. Jackson gets to draw a card. Tom down to 9.
A lot of small triggers going on here. Make sure that Alan gets everything.
Yep, he had life gain, and now it looks like he's drawing the card. So there we go. Yeah, Rally was, if he didn't have it before, he has it now. Rally was the draw for the turn. Or rather, was the draw off that death.
And it's super lethal.
Oh, yeah, there's 2. So, with 2 Zulaport Cutthroats in the graveyard, they're all going to come back, along with a lot of other creatures.
Nantuko Husk for outlets.
Yep.
Ross knows the deal.
So 2 Cutthroats comes into play, Nantuko Husk comes into play. He sacrifices 5 creatures. Each one drains Ross for 2, and that's 9. That'll be game 1 for Alan Jackson.
Very impressive stuff.
What I was impressed by that is when you think about these Aristocrats decks, we talk about them as rally decks, and I would think, in this kind of matchup, I felt like Jackson's game plan was to buy time until he found Rally, which is a fine game plan. But what really surprised me there is that, okay, he won it with Rally, but he would have won it without Rally.
A lot of the threats that Jeskai Black goes to fight Bant Megamorph are creatures with activated powers. Soulfire, Grandmaster, Jace. The deck doesn't kill creatures very effectively, so cheap threats that have activated powers that don't need to engage in combat to be powerful, they're good against this deck. And this is a very souped-up version of that philosophy. There's a lot of cheap creatures that Jackson has here. They interlocked in a very powerful fashion, as you saw there. And it's hard for Ross to break it up because he only has so much removal, and he needs to kill a lot of different stuff.
All right, well, we go to the sideboard. Tom Ross down a game. Some graveyard hate would certainly be acceptable, but let's look at what he has here on the board. So he has Arishan Cleric, Knight of the White Orchid, Mastery of the Unseen, Disdainful Stroke, Surge of Righteousness, Valorous Stance, Stratus Dancer, Hidden Dragon Slayer, Lantern Scout, Negate, and then an extra land is Prairie Stream. A lot of these seem to be set up to fight fair Magic, but that's just not what Alan's doing.
Well, there's nothing wrong here with the Stratus Dancer and the Negate because that closes the door on Rally of the Ancestors. So you can bring those cards in. And I think even though the game isn't quite about combat, Surge of Righteousness probably does enough work against Nantuko Husk where you can bring this in. But you're right. He's light on cards that affect this matchup.
So if Tom can use counterspells to stop the Rally of the Ancestors plays, that game he didn't win the fair Magic game. But do you feel like a lot of the time he still will come out on top?
It's tough. He doesn't interact with the board that effectively. Jackson's going to get a lot of draws that sort of don't go anywhere. He is relying on a couple key cards like Grim Haruspex and Nantuko Husk to do a lot of work. And if he's just on Sultai Emissaries and Carrier Thralls and Zulaport Cutthroats, Ross's creatures are better than those threats. He can overpower those, but it's hard for him to break up the synergies.
All right, we look at Alan Jackson's sideboard. Cards like Hallowed Moonlight, Duress, Felidar Cub, Minister of Pain, Hidden Dragon Slayer, Surge of Righteousness, Radiant Purge, and Murderous Cut. I really liked how he played out game 1. Now, I don't know what he'll go to here game 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if his sideboarding's light.
I think the 2 copies of Murderous Cut are no-brainers here. And past that, I think Minister of Pain could be okay in this matchup. I could take it or leave it, but yes, I think he's going to be sideboarding really light. Most of these cards are committed for other matchups.
Well, what are the cards that he has to worry about out of Tom's deck? On the surface, Wingmate Rock seems like it would be very good, but what else does he have to answer?
Death Raptor, Den Protector.
Okay.
And, Jackson's answer for that sort of stuff in most games is just going to be rally the ancestors and kill you. But we saw that game, when it slowed down, Ross was able to hang a little bit with those kind of cards. If Ross is able to contain cards like Grim Horospex and the Nantuko House, the cards that do the heavy lifting, he can win a slow, drawn-out game. Wingmate Rock would also be valuable in that sort of setup.
So if Ross gets a couple Death Mist Raptors going, then maybe he has a shot in the late game?
Yes.
All right, well, we'll see if he can do that this game. Tom Ross on the play this time starts out with both players trading lands. We talked about Scoured Barrens, part of the mana base for Alan Jackson. Those 2-color enemy decks, even though they're just 2 colors, sometimes do have mana issues.
Yeah, it's not pretty, but, he's trying to cast a bunch of cheap black stuff, and he's got a double white spell in his deck, and that's just the cost of doing business is you got to play with a couple of those.
And we'll see where Tom gets to lead out on then.
Mana base here of 8 Swamp, 2 Plain, 4 Caves of Koilos, 4 Cigar Barrens, 4 Polluted Delta, and 1 Prairie Stream. Prairie Stream being a plains that he can go get with Polluted Delta.
Right, it's helping Polluted Delta actually be a dual land. Snapping Gnarl's the play for Tom Ross, and Sultai Emissary on Alan's side. Yes, we still are playing Constructed, but kind of start you'd expect to see in a different format. Silk Wrap takes care of Sultai Emissary. Snapping Gnarlid swings in for 2. No land drop from Tom, passes back.
That's another card that's one of Tom's best in the matchup is Silk Wrap. Remove all that exiles, and it's cheap enough where it's not, Utter End's probably too expensive to be good most of the time. Ross will take every copy of Silk Wrap and Stasis Snare he can get his hands on.
Go back over to Alan's side. Land number 3. Things were okay for Tom. Silk Wrap on the first creature is very good, but he missed that land drop. We'll see how Alan Jackson can capitalize. Go back over here. He does have a copy of Rally in his hand, so part of the strategy is just going to be to build up the graveyard. It's going to be Grim Horospex, and he passes back. From Tom, he's going to miss the land drop again, it looks like. Den Protector, Gideon, Wingmate Rock. One other card in his hand. A lot of good cards, but not good right now. As you see, swings for 2, plays Den Protector, and passes. This is a dangerous spot for Tom.
Yep. No, that's an ugly way to do it, but he can't just pass the turn there. He's got to keep adding to the board.
Back over to Alan. Does have a copy of Zulaport Cutthroat as well in hand. Murderous Cut, Rally the Ancestors, among his other cards. Here's Merciless Executioner. And just some nice value play here from Alan. He's going to sack the Executioner. Tom will sack a creature. Alan will draw a card.
Yep. And then all these little exchanges wear Ross out of his ability to play a normal game and make sure that Rally is game over if it shows up.
So here's the card draw off our specs. Drew a Hangerback Walker. Scoured Barrens. And it's just these little nickel and dimes. Even that 1-point life gain seems very relevant right here.
Yeah, I think that both copies of Scoured Barrens here have not cost Jackson any tempo. I don't think he had anything to do with his mana anyway, both times. So 2 free points.
Grim Horospex swings and Tom will trade. It's an interesting move from Jackson. Normally you see people very loath to trade away Grim Horospex because of its amazing presence on the board. But I like the play from Alan, actually, given the context.
Yep, just keep the game as clean as possible. And it's not like Jackson is light on cards to win an attrition battle. He can fire back in with Hangerback Walker, a number of other cards. So he doesn't need the Grim Horospex to be able to execute his game plan. And with Rally already in hand, I like being very aggressive about trading.
And the great setup here, Zulaport Cutthroat into play, and then another Merciless Executioner to have Tom sacrifice that second Den Protector before it got a chance to start chaining them. Puts Tom down to 17. Board is now Alan, has a Cutthroat. A lot of pressure on Tom to hit that land right now, though. He can get to Gideon if he has one.
And you may ask, why is Jackson sacrificing the Merciless Executioner, which is a 3-1 against a land-screwed opponent? The logic here is Jackson wants as many copies of Merciless Executioner in the graveyard as possible. So when he rallies, it also just gets to wipe Ross's entire board. He wants them in the graveyard.
Surge of Righteousness takes care of the Cutthroat. Tom back up to 19. So despite being behind on lands, Tom doing a great job of keeping his life total high. Now Jackson will play Hangerback Walker on 2 and pass. We're back to Tom. Does not hit land 4, but he'll have it for next turn. It's Nissa Vastwood Seer. She finds a forest. He'll play it and pass.
The problem is that Search of Righteousness is basically a mulligan the way the game is playing out. Jackson is just leading this game down the road where Rally is going to be a full wipe on everything that Ross has, and these removal spells have very little value in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it saves him some life, and then he gains 2 and didn't take 1 off the attack. But if that rally is lethal, then life gain doesn't matter here.
Yep. And that's the problem with some of these sideboard cards. The game can play out in such a way where Surge of Righteousness is okay, but when it becomes this sort of weird attrition battle, it does very, very little.
And here's a play from Alan. It's Smothering Abomination. He's going to play it and then pump Hangerback Walker, getting ready to sack the Hangerback next turn. Smothering Abomination could be very strong here. So this is a rare here, if you haven't played with it, from Battle of Zendikar. 4/3 flyer for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice a creature to it, but whenever you sacrifice a creature, you draw a card. So it kind of has that Grim Haruspex clause on it. With Hangerback Walker, that's really powerful.
And I think this is a tool for Jackson to win normal games. It's not very good at allowing him to combo out, but it is a card that he can play on turn 4, start wearing out his opponent over the course of turn 4, 5, and 6, and then win the game with Rally after that.
Well, if you look at it here, it's a 4/3 flyer, and it's going to make a lot more flyers in a second. Tom, though, was able to swing and raid a Wingmate Rock, so that's one of his best lines. We'll see if it's enough. Smothering Abomination, as we pass back, Abomination sacks the Hangerback Walker. We'll see if Alan wants to pump first. To get a 4th Thopter, he does. So he'll draw a card off the sacrifice. Then he'll get 4 Thopters, and then he'll draw a card for turn. And yeah, he's building his way up toward that rally, making sure that Rally the Ancestors is lethal. Does have copies of cards like Murderous Cut in his hand as well. And you were saying he can just pull the trigger on a quick rally and just Merciless Executioner away Tom's board, right?
Yeah, if he wants to. I don't see any reason for him to rush it. It's not like Ross has a lot of very good attacks as the way things stand, and Jackson has Murderous Cuts in hand, so Jackson can really navigate this game in a number of ways.
Does Alan have to be concerned about Ross maybe playing a second Wingmate Rock?
Well, you know, you can. The problem with that card right now is that Ross has to make a not great attack to enable it. You send in your 1 token into the Thopters and don't even trade with all the Thopters. It's on his radar, but it's not something where Jackson needs to jump through a lot of hoops to make sure that doesn't happen.
And it looks like Alan's going to go ahead and offer the trade. Smothering Abomination for a bird. This is an interesting spot, whether or not how Tom chooses to play this. He can choose to try to trade, which certainly feels bad here, but the damage race also doesn't feel good.
Yep. If Jackson is making this attack, he's probably got you covered in a number of different ways. Because there's just no way, there's no reason for him to be this aggressive right now. It looks like the game is very, very favorable for him playing it slow. So if he's willing to do this, he's got a lot of routes.
This is just one of those bad news attacks. When your opponent makes it, then that's just all the reasons for it are bad. You see the trade happens there. Tom trades away the token with the Smothering Abomination. See what the follow-up is for Jackson. Cards in hand, Rally the Ancestors, Grim Haruspex, Hangerback Walker, Murderous Cut. If he would have wanted to play this Haruspex, he probably would have played it pre-combat. Could have gotten a card off the Abomination. All right, so if he attacked there and traded, that means Jackson's just falling back on the Fill My Graveyard and Rally the Ancestors plan?
Most likely. I mean, Ross at this point really doesn't have any good attacks. I think Jackson probably would like to use these Thopters and the removal spells he has in hand to answer what's on the table here for Ross and maybe 1 or 2 cards as leftovers, and then shut the door with Rally.
Draw for Tom was a Dromoka's command. That gives maybe that the Wingmate Rock could swing through the Thopters with the help of that card.
But then you are bust to any removal spell in response.
We saw last game Tom had to play into a Murderous Cut. The severity of the situation really forced him to do it. It feels like a lot of the time Tom's not going to have the luxury of playing around cuts. Plays Deathmist Raptor for the turn, leaving up Dromoka's command mana, and he'll swing with both. Nissa and Wingmate Rock. Tom gains 2, goes to 20. Now we go to blocks. If Alan blocks and delves Murder's Cut, he'll have to get rid of 2 creatures. He has 1 land in yards. That's not even bad.
And if Jackson feels like he doesn't even want to worry about Dromoka's Command right now, he can just put all the Thopters in front of Nissa, which is just the block you see right here. There's not a whole lot here for Ross to do with the Dromoka's Command.
Yeah, absolutely not. And he takes care of the Nissa. Loses 2, goes down to 14. Still has 2 Thopters and a hanger back left.
And I really like the pacing of this game here for Jackson. It is not clear that he's losing the game straight up, and he leaves rally back the whole time.
And Tuco Husk the play for Alan Jackson. He has 2 Thopters. He'll swing them both in. Remaining cards still has a Haruspex, a Murderous Cut, and a Rally the Ancestors, as well as a hanger back to pump. And now he'll play Grim Haruspex, taps out for that, so no pump for hanger back. Now that he's tapped down, we'll see if Tom wants to take the opportunity to Dromoka's Command. Not yet. Draws a land.
And this is a spot here from Ross where he's kind of got to answer the board right now. He's got to use whatever spells he has left over and whatever threats to answer Haruspex and then Tuco Husk, because it just represents too much in the long term. Ross doesn't have a whole lot of cards left in his hand, and he doesn't have a whole lot of threats in play. So I think Jackson has gotten the game to the spot where Ross has to fire off his last couple of salvos here, keeping his head above water on the board, and then Rally's going to bury him. It's going to be 2 edicts on the way back, a lot of cards, a lot of draining from the cutthroats.
Yeah, Rally's going to represent at least 10 points, somewhere around 10 points of drain. Though that's not to say that it'll be lethal, but all the sacrifices that Tom will have to do to Merciless Executioners will still be enough. So here's a swing from Tom. He gains 2. You see from Alan, it's a block with Hangerback Walker. He takes 3, goes to 11, gets a Thopter, draws a card. The yard just continues to fill here. Gideon makes an ally for Tom. And it seems like Tom may be hanging on to the Dromoka's Command for, it'll be good if Alan goes for a rally. He can maybe try to get Zulaport Cutthroat off the table before it drains too much. But even then, the stack's going to be really problematic for that.
Yep.
And Tuco Husk being able to sacrifice lots of creatures at instant speed prevents the effectiveness of that play.
Been a very impressive display, though.
And oh no, here's a Zulaport Cutthroat for Alan Jackson.
This
is really lethal now.
This may force the hand on Dromoka's Command.
Swing of everything. Haruspex, Husk, 3 Thopters, all attacking in. At Tom, I believe.
I would assume so.
Ally will go in front of Haruspex. Yep, everything at Tom. He'll sack the ally to Nantuko Husk, drain Tom to 19. Then Tom will take 7. Go to 12. And
Alan's got to be a little careful here, just because if he can't kill the Death Mist Raptor in response, Tom can use Dromoka's Command to fight down the Nantuko Husk, no matter how large it gets. So he needs to make sure he can kill a Death Mist Raptor in response, if he respects the possibility of Dromoka's Command.
So it looks like actually before damage, he's going to sack the Cutthroat as well for 2 more. That does drains for 1. And this is all still before damage. He's going to go for this rally.
Yep. Now, if Alan has him covered regardless, then that's fine.
Well, even if Tom fights down the Husk in response, then the Husk comes back off Rally the Ancestors, and there's enough drains here that Alan just has him dead.
Yeah, there's no way to manage this. That's right.
If he doesn't fight it down, yeah, the Husk will just be in play with 2 Zulaport Cutthroats.
Yeah, I assume that Jackson would have to be able to kill the Death Mist Raptor in response, but that's not the case because there's no window here to kill a Nantuko Husk.
Remember, right now the Husk is a 6/6 already. This is a great quantity of creatures in Alan Jackson's graveyard. 2 cutthroats should be good enough. All right, before rally, he's going to fight down the husk. Okay. So Tom will take, well, he hasn't yet. He's going to take 3 unblocked off those Thopters. All the creatures come back into play. Immediately, the 2 hangerback walkers are going to die, and Tom will get drained for 4.
And there's 2 edicts
Yeah,
involved.
there's
This
2
is
edicts.
Way
This
too
is
much.
It's just a massacre. And 2-0, Alan Jackson in the Black-White Aristocrats deck takes care of Tom Ross. That is an impressive display from the deck.
So the previous builds we've seen in last season standard of the Rally deck, the big question was, could this deck ever win games that didn't involve Rally the Ancestors? A lot of the builds looked like they couldn't. Jackson there was pretty close to winning both of those games, even without Rally the Ancestors entering the equation, and wore Ross out. And then when Rally showed up, there was no question it was going to be lethal.